Well, welcome and good afternoon, everyone. I want to invite everyone in today for part 4 of the series that we're working on. It's probably one of the most serious series I've done since we began doing our projections and things we talk about with the end time. The series is called American Decline. And I'm hesitating going in. It's like, I'm still saying, what style do I use today? Because I'm going to tell you something. When I put this thing together, I felt like I was in Lamentations. You know, you ever read the book of Lamentation? It's not good. And so I'm listening to the news, and like this morning, they're talking about how well everything's doing in America. So Audrey's in the bedroom while I'm at my desk, and I'm working on the finishing touches for the sermon today. And she's got C-SPAN on, and C-SPAN's got the Wall Street Journal. And they're talking about how well everything's doing with all the reports. Well, they're taking phone calls. And there's not a positive phone call coming in. Not one that I heard. So I flipped it on when I was putting the finishing touches today. And the people are calling in, and they're saying, listen, it's really bad in my area. And they're talking about their jobs. And one lady calls in, she works for a hospital. And she says, listen, in our industry, the hospitals, the smaller hospitals, the regional hospitals that have closed and will be closing, she says there's 700 of them that are closing. So they're trying to take a positive spin on his Wall Street Journal report on C-SPAN. And I'm saying, well, does this lady work for the administration? Or is this Wall Street? How can she be this deceived? And she tells the lady, well, it's probably just your area. And I'm saying, how insane is this? 700 hospitals in her area? What, you got one hospital per person? And I was like, wow. So I'm gonna go through this today, and I can just tell you for what it is, and I hope you'll take notes. And I've got a lot to share with you. So you might need to get this on tape, and you might want to watch it again, but to decipher a lot of this. As I was going through, and I was telling Danny day by day as I come over here what we're trying to work on and put into this series. Remember, the first one was called Conspirators of a Fallen Nation, and how this all began because when you don't speak up for the truth, evil flourishes. And that's what the beginning premise was. The whole series is about not standing up for the truth. So the second, we went into the breaking of the pride of our power. And we went into the Hebrew roots of what that really means is that God is showing that He is separating us from His power. So He's broken the power of our people, which means He's not here. He's leaving. Except for the remnant. See, I want to close with some positive thoughts behind this. But if we don't talk about how bad it's going to get, and you and anybody on this program, on this tape, and I'm hoping that this will go to a lot of people, if you don't understand the ramifications of where we're at, like on Danny's board, when I get over here, he's got the consumer engine. And I've been telling everybody, I said, the engine isn't working. I don't care what they're telling you. And so the second was breaking the power. The third one we went to is called Speak to Smooth Things. And we covered, that was a tough one because we had to come into the politics of today and what people want to hear and what they don't want to hear. And the dangers of people saying, just tell me what nice things so there's no reality of what was going out. And today, the last one, very similar as you can see in nature, because they work very close with one another, lovers of self. See, Speak to a Smooth Thing and lovers of self are pretty close. The two kind of go hand in hand. So I use the same theme of this, like the debate, to bring people into it. And it's coming from a scripture coming out of 2 Timothy 3, verse 2. So let's begin. How do you see yourself? Remember, this lovers of self. So how do you see yourself? So I was putting this together and I thought about, how about a baby? Remember the first time a baby ever sees itself in the mirror? They're fascinated with themselves. You can't pull them away from the mirror. It's just, I mean, when you watch a child who sees himself in the mirror, it's really cute. You know? So look, they grow up. They start giving themselves kisses. They just love themselves in that mirror, you know? But then they grow up. These little things that's so cute, they actually grow up and they turn into us. You know, like us. I guarantee you, if you're married, your mate doesn't look at you like that cute little child in the mirror. Sometimes she probably sees you with horns on in that mirror. So they get a little older. Now they get a little, look at the look of that smirk on that face. So it's like, yeah, like, my mother-in-law used to say, with my littlest one, Casey, goes, the look would be like, wait till they get a load of me. Which was real cute. But then you get older, all right? Then you get older. And you began to see yourself. So how do you see yourself as an older person? So we grow up, and is this how you see yourself as an older person? It's cute, isn't it? But here's the point. Quite often, this is how we see ourselves. And when someone says anything that counteracts that, because we are lovers of self, we don't like it. And there's an anger. The Apostle Paul said we're supposed to put away those childish things. So let's talk about today, lovers of self. And we're going to talk about how does the nation see itself and what's going on. That phrase actually comes out of a scripture out of 2 Timothy 3, verse 1 and 2 here, that says this, but know this, in the last days, and that's the theme behind what we're talking about. We're talking about America, and we're talking about the last days. So Paul's very clear when he's talking to Timothy. He says, but in the last days, perilous times will come. So if we don't address the perilous times that's coming, we have not done our job. And I'm very concerned that many in the churches of God, they're not talking about perilous times coming. In fact, I was told a couple years ago, we don't want to go into all that issue. We want to talk about just how to live well, live a godly life and get along with one another. So, but we've always talked about that. That's the basics. When do we get off the basics? When we talk about things that's going to affect people's lives. If you knew down the road at the end of the year there's disasters coming, there's a cliff coming, what good is saying, okay, let's just tell us nice things if we don't talk about what's coming and get people ready for what's ahead? That's the focus of what we've been talking about in this ministry, and that's what the focus of this theme has been. It's like, hey, there's a problem coming, and it's coming very quickly. And I was really surprised to hear Janet Yellen with the Feds talking about, we're not going to raise interest rates right now because things around the economy and around the world, they're slowing down again. And I watched the stock market zoom. Yeah. So, wow. And I said, did anybody just pay attention to what happened? Wall Street knows what's coming, but they got more time now. First time you see billions of dollars being made, knowing that there's trouble out there, they can't raise the interest rate, so that they're telling us, it's okay, we'll get some more time. We can fleece the sheep a little longer. That's what's going on right now. They're going to fleece the sheep just a little bit longer. And why did they get that information? Because Janet Yellen just told them things are really bad out there. They're slowing down. When they said in December that we're going to be raising interest rates maybe 4 times this year, the stock market began to tank. It had the slowest rise since they began recording it. And now, they're not going to raise the interest rates. 1/4 point. Then the stock market takes off again. Why? Because they're coming after the money that's left. The money that's left, that's out there. And I'm going to show you some of that today. So bear with me. I got a lot to cover here. And I'm going to put it in light of Scripture. But I'm telling you something. If you can't take this Scripture of what God says and apply it to how you're going to live, you're not going to make it. If you get yourself pigeonholed in the corner, and don't look at what's going on in the rest of the real world. It's going to come upon you like a thief in the night. We have taught for decades in the church about the warnings and the bridegroom coming at midnight, and half the church was asleep. The rest of the world has no clue what's going on, but the church does. It's time we wake up and we begin to focus on what's coming and look at these issues day to day, minute by minute, second by second if we have to. Because I'm telling you, the things that's coming, it's coming quickly. And it's wound up like a rubber band right now. Now, you haven't heard me talk about the economy for several years, have you? I didn't jump into the pit of whatever somebody said last year when they tried to put the 50 years and they tried to time the blood moons. And we told everybody then, I said, you got it wrong. It's not time yet. What I'm telling you now, that in the next year or two, we could be moving into that time of the next tightening, which could be the next beginning of the next collapse over the next few years. It could be that close. And I'm going to show you the figures now. And you know I have not screamed, the sky is falling. In fact, I told everybody, it's not falling yet. But I'm telling you, it's getting very close. And I'm going to show you why. I'm going to give you just little bits of it here and there. And I got the board. Danny put it on this thing on the board for me. I really like the little cute thing he put in the middle called the consumer engine. He's getting pretty good with the board, but who knows what's going to happen. And we're going to be coming in. He's going to have little pictures and diagrams up there. He'll look just like Glenn Beck's pretty soon. Remember Glenn Beck used to have his chalkboard? All right, let's go on. For men will be lovers of self. Now, I started right there, and I highlighted it in yellow here. Let me show you for a reason why. In the middle of this first two verses is that this is the beginning of everything that begins to deteriorate within the human being. Do you realize that? The deterioration of what's inside a human being. If you love yourself. Lovers of self. This is perilous times, guys, talking about. All right? Lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving. Unforgiving is a pretty tough one. I'm finding more and more people now holding grudges more than ever before. People need to let things go. If you don't let things go, you're going to hurt yourself. You're not going to hurt the person. If you're holding grudges against people and you don't let it go, God can't work with you. So that's just saying, think about it, because I hear people saying, I ain't going to forget what you just did. No, you need to forget it and you need to move on. It never really leaves your mind, I understand that, but the focus in your mind is that you need to forget it and go on. All right, slanderers. Have you listened to the political parties recently? Now I remember why I never paid attention to politics all my life. I said, it's kind of entertaining, but it's pathetic. Who knows what the rest of the world thinks about us? Without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, have a form of godliness. In the middle of all of these two, all right, in the middle of all these two, look what all fills in. When you begin to love yourself, you open your door for any or all of those personality traits. Let's look at those two, all right? Lovers of self and a form of godliness. Those two brings out the very next point of the scripture, but denying its power. Having a form of godliness. What is that saying? In short, if you're denying its power, then you're denying God. In other words, you can preach the good word, you can walk a good word, but I'll tell you, if you start off with lovers of self and you have the form of godliness, anything in the middle, you have just denied the power of God. Why? Because it all starts right there. Breaking the first commandment. You cannot love yourself more than you love God. When you break the first commandment, you have opened your door to all the problems that come in afterwards. Now, that's not complicated. Now, I could spend weeks talking about how to live better, and it all boils down to this. And sometimes we need to just get a little tough and say, hey, listen, get over it. Put it aside. There's important things that we have to deal with. All right? So if you can't get past loving yourself, then you have broken the very first commandment, and from then on, it's a downhill slide. The fruits of our ways. Be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. Do you think people believe that today? Is there anybody in the room who thinks the people in the world believe that today? For anybody who's on this tape, not one hand went up. Not one hand went up. Yeah, I agree with you, because you see, if they really believe what they sow, they would not be living the way they're living now. Now, what I want to do today is I'm going to take an approach of, instead of having to go back and explain lovers of self and let's break that down, I think that's pretty well self-explanatory. I don't think I need to, for any audience, to go through and dissect verse 1 and verse 2 of that chapter. I mean, you can just get a dictionary first and go through and write down each word and then get your dictionary and put down this description next to it. Lovers of self. All those categories will go into that category, the subcategory of lovers of self. What I want to do today is I want to take us now into the fruits of our ways in the United States, because I want to bring this series into a conclusion about where we're heading. And I want to show you some of the engines I've been talking about. When I come in and every Saturday and you hear me in a sermon, I'll tell you, listen, don't believe them, they're lying to you. I want to begin today and take a part of, and I've got lots of notes, I know I can't go through them all, but I just want to give you somewhat to look for of why the United States is failing and why we don't have a lot of time economically. Now, Ecclesiastes 8 says this: because the sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, therefore the hearts of the Son of Man is fully set in them to do evil. If I was to describe this, anybody ever have a dog? They'll tell you if you have a dog who misbehaves, if you don't correct the dog right then, and you go back a half an hour later, 10 minutes later, and you correct the dog, they don't really know what they're being corrected for. Human beings who become lovers of self, when a problem doesn't happen when they do something right away, they think they got away with it. A criminal who doesn't get caught right away, they think they got away with it. Doesn't matter that they left DNA, there's tracks, they got car tracks, they got fingerprints, they got all this stuff. Because they didn't get it right away, they think they got away with it. Well, I'm here to tell you, with God, there is a price to be paid for evil. This is called the law of cause and effect, and that's what I'm going to talk about today with this sermon. America has become disconnected from reality. Disconnected from reality. What is reality? The question could have been, we read it in the New Testament, so what is truth? What is reality? There's actually a couple types of reality. There's the physical and the spiritual. I'll talk about them both. I want to pull in this verse from the last sermon, because this is very important, because this is where our leadership has let us down. But what's worse is that the people who put them in office have gotten disconnected from reality over the past few decades. And the people who go in office are a mirror of themselves. Like that little child that's in that mirror, they will elect somebody. They pick somebody who reflects their views. And that's who gets in office. The majority of it, okay? So here in Isaiah 29:14 it says, therefore, behold, I will do a marvelous work. This is mean like this is going to shock the world, what God's about to do. It's going to shock the world. Among this people, a marvelous work and a wonder, for the wisdom of the wise men shall perish. The decisions that the leadership in America are making today has got everybody around the world scratching their head saying, what's wrong with these people? That makes no sense what they're doing. You know, and you hear them say, don't they understand the path that they're on is not going to be good? They're just leading into destruction? And the understanding of the prudent men shall be hidden. When you don't have wise men making wise decisions, you ever go through your life and you've made decisions, you say, man, I wish I'd have never done that. And sometimes it's too late and you got to go back and you got to live with the problem the rest of your life. Well, that's what this nation is doing right now. The prudent man is so important because when God founded this nation, he gave us men who were not only wise, they were prudent. When they built the Constitution and the bylaws, they looked hundreds of years down the road. They could have never fathomed in their wildest dreams that America would have reached the point that it has reached morally in its degeneration. All right, so the prudent man, which means acting or showing care and thought for the future. All right, so keep this in mind now, because we're going to pull those charts up and we're going to go back into some things that we talked about before. Blessings and cursings. There's not enough time to go through them all, but the cursings and blessings, if you haven't done it, take a moment and go back into Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28. I printed them out. I won't have time to read them all, but I just highlighted a couple things I wanted to bring out in it. through the course of what we're talking about. In Leviticus 26, in verse 6, it says, if we do what we're supposed to do, it says, none will make us afraid. What do we hear is the number one problem for people running for office today? Our safety. America's afraid. You know, God says if God's word's true, if you're blessed, then you won't be afraid. Going on, it says, and none will make you afraid, and I will rid the land of evil beasts, and the sword will not go through your land. We're beginning to see the sword coming into our land. God talks about multiplying his covenant. In Deuteronomy 28, now listen to the wording of this, and I'm going to show you this as I bring this to a conclusion today, so I want you to remember what I'm reading here. And the Lord, this is verse 36, Deuteronomy 28, and the Lord will bring you and the king whom you have set over you to a nation which neither you nor your fathers have known. Remember the way this is written. Think about the election coming. When it talks about the king, it's talking about the rulership, the leadership of a nation. God's saying that the Lord is going to bring you and the person you put in office. Remember that now. And I'm going to show you some connection here that's kind of frightening. And I don't know if you've ever heard this before, and I come across the studies. I was doing it this week. I just sat there and I got stunned when I come across this. Then it says, going on a little further, then the alien who is among you will rise higher than you are. What are we talking about in America today? The illegal aliens that's in the nation. And the cost that it's taken, that they're rising up now. It says, why? Verse 47, because you did not serve the Lord your God with joy and with gladness of heart for the abundance of everything. All right, so you can go through that and you can read all of those things. If you haven't done that, take a look. Look at the wording. So every now and then, God will bring something out. But when I read verse 36, in light of what I'm about to show you today, it stopped me in my tracks. The Lord will bring you and the king whom you have set. In other words, you're picking somebody that I didn't choose. You see the dangers of that? So the one that you have chosen. Remember, the people wanted Saul.
Right.
What did they want? They wanted power. They wanted strength. They wanted this big, tall guy. I'm going to tell you something. Strength does not equate to godliness.
Right.
We need to understand that. All right? You need to understand that. Strength does not equate to godliness. Now, I respect strength. And the evil respects strength, but it doesn't stop it. Only God can stop it. So when I read it that way, I never read it that way until I saw this time. In the king whom you have set over you to, wow. So that's interesting. So keep that in mind so as we get toward the end of this. All right, let's move on now. So I'm going to take too much time up doing all this. The prudent should be hidden. Shows the lack of wisdom and thought in the actions for the future. The fruits of our actions. Let's talk about something that happened 7 years ago, the housing bubble. In the economic, actually there's a movie out now. It's called The Big Short. I think it's kind of vulgar, so I can't really recommend anybody to go to really watch it. Maybe they get it on TV, they can take out some of the language and stuff. But let me see if I can give you a brief explanation of what took place and how it started. And it started off by sounding like it was really good, all right? But when you don't do it with the principles based in God, it doesn't have a good ending, and it never does. The housing bubble began in the 1990s as a way to offer housing to low-income people. In fact, they told the banks, they told the realtors, and the mortgage industry, they were forced to make those loans whether they agreed with them or not, or they would shut them down. They would bring lawsuits against them. And so it began as a way to offer low-income housing. People were sold homes with nothing down and payments they couldn't afford. You know, I remember back then I was making really good money working at a dealership, and I'm looking at these people in these houses, and they basically didn't have any jobs. They're working at, low income. It's like, how do these people afford this kind of house? I couldn't understand it. Well, they couldn't. That was what the problem was. So what did they do? They would do delayed payments. They would call them balloon payments. And so they put them in a house that they can't afford with a very low rent for 5, 6 years, 10 years, to have a balloon note that would come due. And then they would either, by that time, hoping that they had made more money, or they just refinance. And it began to multiply and multiply and multiply. The problem is that in 2000 there began to be a slowdown in our economy. The recession began to come in. It was called the internet bubble, just collapsed. So everything began to come to a slow down in America. Well, the housing market was in trouble. Because as everything slows down, you know what slows down? Is the value of the homes also slow down. So now the people who are in homes that they haven't paid notes on, because all the money's going to interest, the price of the house dropped. Now they're upside down on a note and they can't afford them. So the government created, it began in 2001 to artificially inflate the value of homes. So what does that mean? What did artificial inflation means? So let me put it in terms we can understand in round numbers. If you have a home that's worth $100,000 that you buy today, they inflate the value of that home, all right? So in that home, if you bought it, you're paying a down payment. All right, so let's see, the home, I'm going to show you this when we come up to it, but let me give you so you have on the chart over there, home's up 85% in value. But so let me finish this, and I'm going to come back to that when I got the chart here. So now next year you come back, same time, now your house is worth $200,000. I put 20% down. I had 20% of $100,000 is $20,000. I have $20,000 equity in my home, which was basically the minimum of most of what they should have done for housing. But now my home's worth $200,000. Now I have $120,000 in equity, artificially overnight. That was what was happening from 2001 until 2006. 7 things began to start tightening down, and that's when we began to bring out the coming economic collapse in 2007. It didn't collapse completely to 2008 and going into 2009. So now I got $120,000 on my hands. So wow, that's pretty good. And my equity in my house. What did people do? They went back and refinanced the house and took a lot of that equity out. The money they took out, they had to keep the minimum in, so now they put $40,000 in, I take $80,000 out, and I spend it. That helped stimulate the economy. And it was done over and over, many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of times across the nation. That's how they got the economy generated again. That's basically, that's what they did in 2001 to 2005. The government artificially inflated the housing market to stimulate the economy. Suddenly, people had huge amounts of money and their equity in their homes. The refinance news ballooned and the payments were delayed. Again, now I want to tell you what the other problem is. Now they got a house, they having to pay taxes on this. And this time when the balloon comes due, it's twice what it was. See the problem? It's because you didn't think down the road what's going to happen. Because they thought it's never going to come to an end. Because it was just going on and on and on. Now, the greed sets in from the commercial side. And they began to have everyone buy as many homes as they could sell them to. Nobody checking credit. Nobody checking the risk factors. Didn't matter if you had a job or not in many cases. Just get them into a home. Well, then began to do what they call bank bundling of loans. And when I remember saying back in 2007, I said, what is a derivative? I couldn't explain derivatives back then, but you can now. Derivatives were created from the original loans that were repackaged and resold to other investors. I remember my property, I kept every few months, I'd have a new owner of my loan. Y'all remember that? Yeah. Everybody's shaking their heads. If they're on the camera, you're probably shaking your head too on this tape. Well, let me tell you what that was doing. It was taking where a person was maxed out on how much they could actually be doing business because of their equity. They would take their equity, and they would take pieces of it and create a new platform, put these bundles into it, and then sell them. Now, they collect all that money. Now they're ready to go do it again. And so it multiplied and it multiplied. And one home could actually have the mortgage on it multiplied through derivatives and unsecured collateral 100 times. And so nobody knew how bad the damage was that was coming. And when it began to collapse, because the defaults were coming and people couldn't pay, it just ballooned. I'm here to tell you now, 7 years later, in many ways, not just the housing, in many ways we are there again. And I'm going to show you some of that. There's the defaults and the loans magnified until the collapse. Fruits of the housing bubble, this is what happened. This is the fruits. Lovers of self. $5 trillion was lost in the real estate and pensions. Where'd the money come from? Well, they had to get it from somewhere. The government absorbed it, and then you lost money in your stock market, and your pensions, your 401k, and your retirements. Some people lost as much as 60 to 80% of their retirement. Now, this is going to make people angry when I get to where I'm going to be at over there. I'm going to tell you what happens. 6 million homes were lost. So this stuff just went out of sight. 8 million jobs were lost. This is from one industry. Now, I've got on the board when I get over there, the U.S. debt, auto loans, student loans, I didn't even put up their credit card or health. I just want to take a couple of things to show you today. What's not included is this. We added nearly $5 trillion in bailouts from you. You bailed them out. How? In U.S. debt. It was more than just giving the money to the banks. It was the increase that they had to spend money to get the economy to keep rolling. $5 trillion as a minimum to get things going. Why? Because of the love of self, the greed, and the lies when they told everybody. I still remember watching the Fannie Mae and the bubbles and they in front of Congress saying there's nothing wrong with the housing market. And besides, it's never happened before, it won't happen now. Do y'all remember that? Yeah. And I said, they're lying to us, that's lying to us, they're lying to us. All right? Banks were bailed out because they were too big to fail. Do you know those same banks are bigger than they were then? They're bigger than they were then. Today, those same banks are bigger than they were 7 years ago. I think they only let one thing fall. I could be two, I don't remember. The root cause of the problem, law and effect. All right, so now, we removed the economic standard and we removed the spiritual standard many years ago. So I'm going to take both of those. Now, this is where I'm going to go from the rest of this on. I'm going to talk about the economic standard first, then I'm going to talk about the spiritual standard. Because if you take away the spiritual, there is no economic standard. Everybody does, like we look in the book of Judges, everybody does what's right in their own eyes. Now, you remember I put this up last week? I showed you, the last time I did this, two weeks ago, I showed you a couple areas about the workforce, and I want to help you read this today. I want you to be able to go into wherever you're at in the stock, to look at the markets, look at the government, look at the debt, read behind the scenes. If we could, I want to sit down and have an economic class with people and put it in relationship to what God says. And I believe me, it will help you to understand where we're going as a nation and as a people, to protect yourselves for what's coming. Because my emails are filled with people talking about the end of the world. Are you getting those yet? And every one of them want to sell me something. Yeah, I'm going to get you through this end of the world that's coming. And you're going to be rich when it's all over. They don't have a clue what's coming. They really don't. But do you know what the problem is? Their figures are right. The numbers are accurate. The thought behind it is wrong, and they don't understand what's coming. But you can't deny the figures most of these people have. All right, so now what I've got here, let me show you this. I did these two charts. The first one here, showing $19 trillion, 115 million, or billion, 2 weeks ago. And I did them on the same day, or 14 days apart. Not within the same hour, I don't remember what hour it was. But here, now I did this on Wednesday, showing the United States at 19 trillion, 205 billion. 2 weeks ago, 14 days, it was at 19 trillion, 115 billion. 14 days. In 14 days, the debt rose from 19 trillion 5 to 19 trillion 205, which said the debt rose $90 billion in 2 weeks. You ready for that? If you just had this and you watched the news and it said, hey, we're doing really good, and the stock market's going up, I don't know about you, but losing $90 billion in 2 weeks, that's coming out of my pocket down the road and our grandkids, is not very good to me. That means it went up $6.43 billion a day. Now, they tell us it's only going up $2.4 billion a day. And that's possible. That is possible. Because you see, the debt doesn't rise the same thing every day. Different parts of the month, depending on when the debt is put in versus the income that comes in from taxes, it fluctuates. But in this due period, I've got it in black and white. Or in this case, red and blue. $6.43 billion a day in debt that it rose. All right, so let's go back to the debt clock. Now let's read something else out of this. See, if you go through here and you begin to decipher what's going on and you get educated of what's taking place, you won't let them lie to you. Now let's talk about this section down here. I blew it up so it's a little fuzzy. Living in poverty, Medicare, food stamps, insurance, Medicaid, total recipients receiving benefits. 161 million people are receiving government benefits right now. We only got 323 million in the country. Out of that, 161 million are getting government benefits. What have we done? We've created a welfare state. We have created a welfare state. Now, when I tell you we got an angry people, why can I say that? Because I can look at this chart now, and I put it together with human nature that I understand from the Bible. And I look at the principles where God says, you don't work, you don't eat. All right? And you put all this together. So what am I looking at now? Now I can follow a path. Now I've got a path to follow. The first thing is this. And when I do this, stage one is that when you help somebody, do it on a personal level. If you help somebody, they appreciate it. But if they don't change their way, they got to come back to you. Eventually, they get to stage two, is they expect the help. Now they don't appreciate it, they expect it. It's like it's required of you to give it to them. All right? How about this next one? Stage three, then they demand it. No, you owe it to me. You owe it to me. Why? Because that's what you've always done. So now when you got a politician runs out there and say, we want to cut all these benefits, you have now got an angry constituent. You got 161 million of them because they said, you owe it to me. When you watch them interviewed on TV, it says, it's my right. Now they say it's my right to have a house. Yeah, it's your right, go earn it. Everybody has a right to, but I don't have a responsibility to give it to you. Do you realize that our forefathers, who were prudent men, when they built the Constitution, it was against the law to take it from you to give it to him? Do you realize that? That changed after World War I, before World War II. Roosevelt did it, and he did it over 12 years because it was unconstitutional when he did it. It was called the New Deal. Here's the New Deal. I'm going to take your money and give it to him. Well, he passed laws, like today we would deem them. Well, he would pass them that they knew were unconstitutional. So by the time it hit the Supreme Court, he done put another one in. When that one came out, this one's in. During the course of that time, the Supreme Court judges were changed. And the ones that went in agreed with Roosevelt. And by the time that administration over, it was legal now to take it from you and give it to him. The wisdom of our forefathers protected us. Everything that's going on in the election today, mark my word, this is all smoke and mirrors. There's one thing at stake: the freedom with the Constitution and the bylaws of our nation and the return of Jesus Christ. Everything else is smoke and mirrors. I know that's too simple. I'm telling you, that's the truth, and I'm going to show you before this sermon's over. Now, number four, stage four, they take it because it's their right. Now, I've got a video coming. See if our tower is ready. This is really funny. This is something that was on TV, but this is the mentality people are going to when they're not angry yet, but they're in the stage that they expect the help and they demand it. Is the video ready? Y'all can watch it up here on the screen.
800 Judy.
Hey, Ms. Gephardt, I'm listening. Well, she's telling the truth that I went to her house, but beyond that, it did not happen anything like that.
Well, tell me how it happened.
I went to her house. She was a good friend of mine. I was telling her about our move, and she said, let me help you out. Let me give you some money. And I said, I can't pay you back. She said, no problem, don't worry about it.
Miss Gephardt, let me ask you a question. You've been friends with Miss Franson for how long?
2 years.
How did you meet her?
I attended a class that she taught.
What kind of class?
Childbirth.
How many children do you have?
I have 5 children.
How old are they?
My twins are 8. I have a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 9-month-old.
Do you work?
I have 5 children. They're my work.
How many children does she have?
2.
How old are they?
8 and 6.
And she works?
Yes, she works.
You see, she has children and she works.
She only has 2 children.
She has as many children as she can afford to take care of.
I also have a dog.
Well, that's your problem. You know, you can have as many children as you like as long as you're able to take care of them. When you have to rely on other people to take care of your children, then it becomes more of a problem. And it doesn't sound to me as if Miss Franson, who has 2 children of her own, who teaches classes, because that's the way you say you met her, is floating in dough.
She is floating in dough.
Oh, she's floating in whose dough?
Hers and her husband's.
Since when did you become a partner in her and her husband's money? That's what's wrong with this country.
She and her husband both drive BMWs.
And
they have childcare, and they have weekly house cleanings.
And you don't sound like an unintelligent woman, Miss Gephardt. I would assume that if you hadn't made 5 children, you would be able to have a job and work full time and maybe drive around in a BMW. Instead, what you chose to do is you chose to have a gaggle of children. That was your choice. Your choice to have a lot of kids. She chose to have 2, have a job, drive around in a BMW. What is that? Your business.
It's not my business, but she had the money to give me. She loaned. She didn't loan.
Now, judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $2,000. That's all.
Thank you.
I could have tried to explain this, but I mean, that was much better. But that's the mentality of people today. So now they're saying, well, we need to go after the rich people because they got money. It's mine. That's not fair. It's against the principles of God. And if you can't balance that out, you got a real problem. Now, this is something very interesting. This is in the corner over here in the chart. But I tell you what, we could go through, I mean, week by week, you could take a little section out of here and you can put it to the economy and help explain a lot. The economy of silver to gold ratio to back when it was in 1930. So I'm just taking the gold right now. The U.S. gold standard was pegged to the U.S. dollar and it was dropped in August 15, 1971. Now, in 1913, the price of an ounce of gold to the dollar was at $28.87. It was stationary almost to 1971 when it was pegged to the dollar. In other words, the amount of, if we had debt and we had equity, we had in the economy for the government and being solvent, every time we issued a dollar, we had gold to back it up. That was the standard. That standard was accepted worldwide. In 1971, that changed. Today, the dollar-gold ratio now is 64,000 to 1. What that means is that the buying power and the government stability to be able to back its securities versus its loans, it would have to come up with $6,400 for an ounce of gold and the buying power of what it actually had. Now, that's hard to fathom, how that's, but it has actually calculated to where it's at. Now, the Dow Jones in 1871 was 890. And when this was done in 1913, it was only about 80. So it only went up so much till then. It did rise, but then it began to skyrocket when we unpegged the dollar from gold. So now on, there's no standard. We can have as many dollars as we want because we're not accountable anymore. We're not accountable. So if you had your home and you had a printing press in your backyard, which a lot of people tried, you run out of money, you just go print some more. Well, that doesn't work that way in the real world. 58 years, it went to 890, and it went to $35 an ounce. It only went up a little over $6 in 58 years. Why? Because everything was stable and it was pegged to something. Now watch. Today goes at $1,200. In winter's high is almost $2,000. And in 45 years, it went from $35 to $1,200. And that's not even close to the value of what it should be. Not even close. So what does that tell us? Something got obscured in 1971. What was it? It was this. There's a debt chart. By 1973, By 1973, with the Vietnam, the loss in Vietnam, with abortion, with the rise in debt now, because it's no longer pegged to that dollar, we began to watch this rise. And along with it, the ratio of dollars to gold and its value and ability to be pegged to other currencies and to what we owe. Now, this was in 2012. I couldn't even find a current chart, to be honest with you. That was in 2012. They expect by 2020, 4 more years, that we'll be at $23 trillion in debt. Because there's nothing to stop it. There's no way to control it anymore. Now, going on, this is going to shock you here. Median income, 2000 and today. In 2000, the median income was at $28,291 per person. This is according to the government's own charts. I'm not making this up. The government's own charts. So we went up. Now let's go over to the board. So we went up the grand total of 0.4 of 1% per year in your income, in the median income. Actually, if we started in 1999, we are less money today. But that's all they had on the chart was the 2000, so that's what I went with. 0.4% per year is your increase. All right, so people, when I'm listening today and they're talking about how well the economy, and those people kept calling into the Wall Street Journal, everybody said, well, listen, that's not the case here. You know, and they go through all the horror stories. In the Wall Street Journal, they're trying to explain it all away. And it wasn't getting anywhere. And that's what I'm saying today, it's not explainable. So now, it went up that much. Now watch. Median homes, remember I talked about the homes rising? Look at the home value today. Homes are up 84%. The price of a home is 84% now, higher than it was in 2000 for a median home. While your increase in pay is only going up 6 or 7%, the price is going up 84% for homes. So what does that tell me? Well, it tells me that home ownership now is dropped to its lowest level since 1967. Because people can't afford homes. Why? Because they're out of sight. Something else it tells me, let me go back over here, that as the homes go up and my income's almost stationary, I'm having to pay more for taxes and more for insurance. So now the little bit of money that I've got is buying me less. So what are people doing? When they get elderly, they don't have any money. So now they break another principle of God, which tells me you lay in store for your children. Well, they can't lay in store for the children. Why? Because they're doing reverse mortgages. And that runs out fast. Why? Because they're paying for this new health plan that's out of sight, going up 30, 40, 50% a year in many cases. And the deductibles are so high you can't even get to use the insurance. All right, so now, what else is going on? Look at this new thing. And I told you this was coming a couple years ago. You look at TV now and sell your life insurance policy. You don't need that. Why? Because they're running out of money for reverse mortgages. And so now they have to get money somewhere. Why? Because the engine is drying up. Around the world, the debt is growing. It's growing faster than we ever imagined. Now, I want to show you something right here. Man, I ain't going to have enough time. Danny was right. He says, you're not going to get all this done. I want to show you something here. It's 1967, just stuck in my mind. It's like, what happened, Ben? The Six-Day War. We're at 50 years now. We're beginning to begin that new 50-year cycle pretty soon. What happened, too, was the beginning of the changing in the standards of the morals. Actually, I found law cases in my research now showing that they began debating and approving abortion as early as 1966. And it began to be a fight until 1973 when it was approved. 50 years, keep that in mind. We'll come back to that later. Now, since then, because home sales have been dropping, home rentals have been increasing. Now, here's the thing that's going to make you angry. When the mortgage people did what they did, and of course we showed you over $10 trillion, millions of people lost jobs and homes, what happened? The government took the money that they didn't have from you and I for down the road, and they gave it to the banking system because they're too big to fail, to get the economy going. Well, they never got going. Why? Because the banking system now, who's got that money, what did they do? They went and bought up all the homes that they forced people out of because of what they did to begin with. Now those same people have the homes that they run 6 million people out of, and now they're renting them. So, wow. Now look at what happens. Now they got that secure. What happens next? I typed this up. I went into Google and said, rental rates on the rise. I just typed that in. Look what the first 4 things that came up on Google. Rental rates rise. What to expect in 2016? Housing rental rising 8%. Property ministers predict rental rates to increase. How rising rents are about to crush America's spending. They created the bubble that took the home away, owned the home, put people in it, and now taking the money from them. That is corrupt. I'm sorry, it's corrupt. And I'm not making this up. Go prove it out. That's just one thing. Now, I got to go real quick. I'm not going to cover as much as I wanted to. U.S. debt. We showed it before. This article says $118 trillion debt bomb. The total credit card debt in the fourth quarter rose more in one quarter than it has in the previous 2 years. One quarter in the fourth quarter. That's the U.S. debt card. Pension debt. Pension debt by states. They owe $5.8 trillion in pension debt that's been due, that's going to be paid to people who's retiring. They've only got 2.5 to cover that. Pension debt, they're short $3 trillion just to cover people's retirements. You just move real quick. Corporate borrowing. Corporate borrowing was $6.5 billion in 2005, before the collapse. Corporate borrowing today, $1.2 trillion. More than doubled. By mid-2015, 62% of all companies had twice as much debt on their balance sheets as they did before the collapse. See what's going on here? There have been 51 municipal bankruptcy filings, including San Bernardino. It's kind of interesting that the attack took place in San Bernardino, California, with a terrorist. They were also filed for bankruptcy. It goes on and on and on. The $19 trillion that is on the books that we showed today, if you actually account it like you're supposed to, according to procedures by accounting, is actually $65 trillion, not counting the $119 trillion time bomb. So anyway, I won't go through that. Auto defaults. This is interesting. You hear in the news they brag about how well auto sales are doing. Auto loans, $1 trillion on the books. $1 trillion on the books. They're selling auto loans like they were selling houses. They're being sold to what they call subprime borrowers, people who can't afford the car. So what are they doing? They're taking the cars, they're now going 72 to 84 months to pay for that car. And many of them with balloon payments. And they're defaulting at a record rate already. These loans are up 16% in defaults in one quarter. One quarter. I'm just going to show you. Student loans, $1.1 trillion. Student loans. So what does this briefly show me here? It's telling me that our future has been sold out. It's gone. It's gone. Everybody in business and government who have been lovers of self has sold our nation out, our children out, our future out. And what's going on now is all of the debts continue to rise faster than they get put out the flames. I mean, I just have to do another sermon on this. I wanted to go into showing you some of how these derivatives are all now beginning to take place. What's keeping the market up? Well, there's money coming out of the market to pay debt. $40 billion have came out of mutual funds. $40 billion in one quarter. Why? To pay for bad debt and bad loans. Well, what's keeping the market up? The companies are borrowing money from the government at 0 to 1% or 0.5%, and they're buying their stocks back to keep it artificially inflated because there's no buyers for the market. It's incredible what's going on behind the scenes. Meanwhile, everybody's being told how good it is. I'm telling you, it's not. And you need to get yourself braced, because when it comes, like God says, it's going to be like a thief in the night. You're going to wake up one day and it will snap. When? I don't know, but I got a feeling there's a bad thing coming. I'll show you. The financial picture in America since the collapse, the new economic bubbles is the U.S. debt, auto loans, student loans, and I don't even have up here because of time, is health care. Health care. It's just robbing everybody. One law. God says one law should be for the native born and for the stranger who dwells among you. God says there's a way that seems right to man. And by having all these different entities that are out there, well, this person has to, well, he has to follow the law, he doesn't. We'll prosecute this criminal, we're not going to prosecute this criminal. When you say it's an illegal alien, it means he broke the law. Well, we're not going to prosecute him. Well, how about if I just go rob a bank, you don't prosecute me? Oh, no, that's different. Well, one law, God says. When you break the principle, remember I said when you disconnect physically, I showed you. Now the disconnect spiritually is because you're breaking down the principles of God spiritually. Everybody is to be judged the same, just the way God does. He is not a respecter of person. In Judges, it says many times, it says, in those days there was no king in Israel, but every man did according to what was right in his own eyes. Well, we're in that time stage right now. You go back and read it. I actually had a couple chapters here I wanted to bring out, but just go back and read a couple chapters toward the end, chapter 17 through 21. And you see like a civil war broke out because people brought things and did things what they thought was right. And in 3 days, 65,000 Israelites were killed in the civil war because they were doing what they thought was right in their own eyes. They just about wiped out the tribe of Benjamin. Go back and read it. And it says over and over again, there was no king. And so everybody did what was right in their own eyes. One law continued. The events of Judges led to civil war in Israel. I want you to go back and read that. It was a time of chaos, depravity, extreme violence, and civil unrest in Israel by the end of the book of Judges. That's why I said last week in the last sermon, I said we're going to see civil unrest unprecedented since the 60s coming up. Why? Because I got the pattern. I could follow the principles of God. I laid it out what's coming. We talked about the mindset of the people. Look at Judge Judy. I'd say, oh, you got money? Give it to me. When they don't have food in their bellies, and they don't have a place to lay their heads, it isn't going to be cute like that. It's going to be angry. There's already many death threats on the air of people who's running in office. I mean, they got groups of people now creating songs to kill people. There's no prosecution for any of this. Oh, they don't mean any harm. The crime statistics in America. Violent crimes in 2014, murder, 14,000. Rape, 116,000. Robbery, 325,000. Assault, 741,000. Property crimes. Burglary, 1.7 million homes. Theft, 5.8 million thefts. Auto thefts, 689,000. And as many as 40% of these crimes are not even reported. Christ had a phrase, he says, if they will do this in the green years, this is all taking place while we're not under a lot of problem. What will happen when things turn brown? You got to put this in your heads and think about it. In Israel, there was one law. In America, there should be one law. Israel had primarily the 10 Commandments and statutes and the judgments. In America, we had the Constitution, the amendments, and the Bill of Rights. Very similar. The patterns are very similar. We were built upon the principles of Israel. The future of the freedom in America, as was established, lies in the Supreme Court and the nominees is protected in the Constitution. I brought this out once before, so I'll just go through this real quickly because I want to get to the final point to make this nail what I'm talking down and get you to think about something. This came out of the rise of the Holy Roman Revival. If you didn't get that DVD, you need to get it. And we were talking about during the 1260 years, which was a duality of the 1260 days in the book of Revelation coming. And we show that during the time that Rome began, they began to rule, all right, from 554 and 538, when the law went in, Justinian law, at 538. It was finished at 1798 when the papacy was removed. The interesting connection is this, is that during those 1260 years, the Roman law, the Justinian law that ruled was done by the beast, the type of beast of Revelation that was coming. In 1787, the Constitution was ratified. It wasn't completed yet, but it was ratified. 1787 was the beginning of the removal of the Justinian law, which would totally be abolished in 1789. 1798, Virginia's resolution, after years of internal conflict, finally agreed to the Constitution. It was also the same year that the papacy was removed. What God did is during those 1,260 years, He hid the 12 tribes of Israel. And He scattered them where He wanted them to be, so that when it was time, He would raise them up in America to warn this nation for the end time. The only thing that protected those people in that warning was the Constitution. The Constitution protected the freedom of speech, the freedom of religion. Why do you think that is always coming under attack? If the Constitution is removed, so is your free speech for the warning, for the return of Jesus Christ, and the morals and the standards that God gives us today. Then I went on as we finished this, talking about eventually was the manifest destiny of America when we went to the East Coast and eventually had 50 states. Kind of interesting, 50 states, picturing freedom. One thing can be certain, we will continue to see the acceleration and the deterioration of America. I want to bring this in to close. This was brought in back, I think we did that during the blood moons. I want to bring something out, and I'm going to show you something today that caught my eye with all of this. If I had to ask you, when do you think this is going to happen? When do you think the trigger would begin to bring down all these things? I don't really know. I really don't. But I know that as things are escalating, they're picking up speed. You know, the government knows it's picking up speed. That's why they're not going to raise the rates again. That's why Wall Street went excited and the whole world went crazy and billions of dollars was made again. I'm going to show you something that when we did this a couple years ago, we weren't looking at this. This is pointing to a time of September 2017. All right, so now let's go back. I'm going to give you a quick explanation, and you can go back because you've seen this before, but I need to bring it out now because I want to bring out a possibility. Something we've never discussed. In fact, I've never heard it anywhere. Revelation chapter 12. This is where it talks about the sign of a woman appearing in heaven, clothed with the sun. The moon was on her feet, and a garland in her hair. And I'm going to go through all of that. It says, then being with child, she cried out in labor and pain to give birth. This is a time that's parallel to the time of Jacob's trouble. All right, the 3.5 years. All right, so we had the constellation here, the constellation Virgo, which you know, talk about the birth of the Virgin, Christ. You talk about Leo, was the king. The planet Jupiter, which is a king planet. They call it the king planet. So I put that down here. And so now, September 23rd, 2017, we have this alignment coming through. All right, we have shown the alignment of the woman with the sun, clothed in the sun. And so I'm going to go through this right quick, and then I'm going to play it again. There's the moon. Talked about the moon under her feet. Said on her head was a garland of 12 stars. So we got the 12 stars. There's 1. All right. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So you got the 9 stars, and you have what's called the roving stars, which are the 3 planets. We went through this before, but anyway, we got the picture now. This is in essence what we were looking at in the book of Revelation. Now, this alignment only takes place one time in history. It only lines up this way. What I'm about to show you one time in history. It says, then being with child, she cried out in labor, and she gives birth. All right, so here we go. This is where the Jupiter is, and this would be like the birth where they would carry in the womb. And we're going to show how this planet is in the womb. The king is in the womb for approximately 9 months. Remember we went through all of that? Let me show you something else now. All right, so now here's the video. You see the timestamp here? All right. See that timestamp is 11/20/2016. When I go through this, I want you to pay attention to something. When we begin to see Jupiter going into the womb is in the month of the election this year. Remember what I just read here? And the Lord will bring you and the king whom you have set over you. Right? The king. In other words, this election could be the most important election in America's history. The person who gets in, if they get in and they don't approve of the Constitution the way it is, and there's many who don't, they want to change it, will mark the beginning of the end for our freedom. It's very interesting that this takes place when this movement begins, and you're going to see it. It begins to make its movement into the womb area in the very month of the election. And I saw that this week. I said, wow. And I remember Deuteronomy. I said, what is God showing us here? Could God be telling us? I don't know. And I'll be real clear when I say that. Let me say it again. I don't know, but I couldn't tell you what I'm telling you today a year ago. Could God be telling us the beginning of the time of the woes of America could begin depending on the future of the decision of the people of America this year? I don't know. Let's go on. All right, so here's the video, and I'm going to talk it through. It's going to run on its own. It's a video. I have no control, all right? So we're starting back in 16. See Jupiter. It's not in the womb yet, and I'm going to show you the month, all right? All right, so we got Jupiter right here. There's the womb. It's got the arrow showing you. Look at the date. All right, that's the end of October. So now we begin its movement. Begin 11/4. All right, 11/4. It begins to approach the womb around the time of the election, and it goes in. It stays in. It's the only time in history it does that. I stopped it. There we are at 11/19/18. It's actually gone across into the womb, and so now it continues to move. We're at 11/23. It is totally inside the womb area. It will stay in there for the next 9 months. It moves back and forth, back and forth. The only time in history that it does that. And so now I'm speeding it up. You're watching it go through. That little thing going across that way, that's the moon going by. It's going by. There it goes by again. Every time it goes by, you're going by a month. We're in the second month of 2017. All right, third month, 2017. See it? It just goes back and forth, staying inside. It's the only time it does that. We're going now. We're in May 2017. The key's moving. All right, we're moving through month by month. We're in June. Now we're coming into July. Again, back and forth. It gets right to the edges of the womb, and it goes back and forth. Now I'm slowing it down. We're coming to August. Everything's moving into this place, what we've seen in September 23rd. All right, we're at 9/9. I stopped it right there. All right, so 9/9, Jupiter now is about to cross outside of the womb area. For the first time since it went in November of 2016. The sun is moving to its place. I'm going day by day now. You see all the planets lining up, the sun's lining up, and in a second you will see the moon coming through, and it will also line up at the feet where we're coming to. All right, so I'm putting everything in its place, so I go and give it another couple days. 9/21, 9/22, 9/23, and that's where we stopped it. 9/23. Everything in its place. They got the 12 stars in her garland. The sun is on her shoulders. Jupiter has now been through its period of 9 months, had been delivered, and the moon is at her feet. Then I went ahead and I just fast forwarded it and showing everything continues on in its path. All right. So now, that's the only time I put that in there. Is this a warning coming in 2017? I don't know. I tend to believe it is. I tend to believe it is. Why do I say that? Because if I had a chance to go through all these papers here that I don't have time to go through today, I would show you how month by month the debt default levels in every one of these categories, and other ones I haven't even done yet, is rising at an accelerated pace. I would show you how just one group, because Valiant, the pharmaceutical company Valiant, who's huge, has begun to fraud people by raising artificial prices on drugs. And now they've artificially inflated their profit levels, and they begin getting caught, and it costs one small individual in his mutual fund $3.6 billion overnight. And that's just one company. I think we're getting close to the time that we're going to begin to see the time of Jacob's trouble. Will it happen next year? I don't know. But one thing's for certain, it can't go on much longer. America today, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. Let me close with something positive. God is sharing this with his people. He has a reason. He wants us to be that beacon of light and hope to this world that has no clue what's coming. We need to be more focused. We need to be more aware and more dedicated to the truth and the cause and your conviction and your calling than you ever have. You have been called to be a part of the most important work on the face of the earth. That is the warning message that Jesus Christ is coming. Now, you got a choice. You can do like almost everybody else wants to do. Say, this is nonsense, put it aside, and go on your merry way. Or you can get on your feet, get on your knees, and go to God and look for direction. Get your houses in order. Quit worrying about yourself and think about the calling that God has given you. You have got a chance to be in rulership with the coming King to this earth. Don't throw it away. It is the most important job you will ever have. God bless you. I hope you will share this with everybody you know. Until next time, God be with you.